All right, so we're gonna look at two different things here. Oh, that one's moving. Didn't expect that one to move. That's interesting. This, oh, just went by again. So, hold on. Let's see if I can get this stop. Nope. Get the stop in a second. We're looking at two things: fair trade and the exchange rate. Okay, those are the two main focuses. I'm also going to start. Okay, right there. Oh, you saw that one with the black symbol, and the one that's on the bananas chest there. That is the one you'll see most often associated with fair trade. But before I get into that, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm getting a lot of questions about calculating all these different things. For the question from yesterday about figuring out whether they should trade or not, Canada, Brazil, Canada, don't remember. It was probably the U.S. Yeah, Canada, U.S. So those two. For some reason, I said graph it. No graph. Sorry, don't do it. It's not necessary. You just need to be able to figure out whether or not it is advantageous for them to trade, and what is the threshold for that trade. And so you can do that just by figuring out the opportunity cost given that 1 point. It is possible to figure out the graph, but I don't know why. If you haven't done it, then don't do it. If you've already done it, good for you. Sorry to make you do it. If you go into economics, you will be doing it. You'll be using those calculus skills with slope and all that stuff. But it's not necessary for this. More as I just want you to look at it in terms of whether trade is advantageous or not. That's the big thing. So the first part, this is like the worst GIF I saw. So obviously I had to use it for fair trade. For those of you who don't know what fair trade is, it's I'm going to have a video posted to the content. It's very important in terms of people looking after people in the world. So as we've looked at sweatshops before, and we look at basically the well-off countries like Canada, the rich countries are exploiting the labor in the poorer countries because we have the economic might to do so. The fair trade is an organization or a collection that pays workers livable wages, to harvest things like coffee beans and chocolate. Those are two big ones. There's like 7,000 products, flowers. There's lots of things that fair trade. And if you have the opportunity to choose between fair trade and non-fair trade, you should choose fair trade just because of that. That particular aspect of it being a little more environmental and definitely more humane in terms of paying people living wages. It is not, however, necessarily still that sustainable. It's not necessarily. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. Okay, so that's just what fair trade is. Again, I'll have a video that talks more about it. We're not going to do an assignment based on it, but it's important to know the aspect of fair trade and the kind of pushback against just the strict capitalist. Wow, that was like a Romeo and Juliet Capulet in there. Capulets and the Montagues. Oof, don't want to talk about that. I do not like that play. Anyway, moving on. It is a pushback against these strict capitalist markets. And in that, sending a message that looking after people is important. Okay. So moving on from there, we're going to look at the exchange rate. So everybody has probably seen something that looks like this. Walking through the mall, walking through the airport, you see these things. You're aware that you cannot use a Canadian dollar in every spot. You have to get other countries' currencies. So if you go to most of Europe, you exchange the Canadian dollar for the euro. Other countries in Europe don't use the euro, like the Swiss franc is one. England still uses the pound. Poland uses zlotys, and anyway, there's a bunch that don't use the euro. Obviously, the United States uses the U.S. dollar. Mexico uses pesos, right? Japan uses yen. China uses yuan. I don't know if I'm saying that one right. The Australian dollars. Anyway, on and on and on and on and on. Point being is that not every country, but most countries have their own currency if they're able to have their own currency. And you must exchange. And beyond that, there is a market for just for currency. So people will invest in the US dollar, they'll invest in the Canadian dollar, that kind of thing, because they're banking on for the most part, they're banking on the dollar to go up in value and then sell it off, so on and so forth. So if the economy is doing well, it'll go up. So there's an article just from last month that talks about the increase of the loonie. So right now, our loonie was right around 79.5 cents US, which means for every dollar Canadian, you get just under 80 cents US. Okay, so I think people understand that concept. Now, what is that even? Why do we, besides going and spending money in another country, does it have any other effects? Yes, of course it does. This has been the trend in the last number of years. Actually, that's an old one. Okay, I think I chose the wrong one there, but that's fine. You can see the trend though. We'd be right here approximately now. Whoop, there we go, back up. This is historical. You can see here in the 60s and stuff. What is this stuff? Well, all of this, don't even bother looking at it, because that is the difference between when we were on a fixed rate and now we're on what's called a floating exchange rate. Now, a fixed rate is when your country, your central bank, so the Bank of Canada, pegs your currency to another currency, or it pegs it to a basket of goods of other currencies. And what it does is it forces the central bank to use monetary policy, so buying up bonds, buying up Canadian dollars on the markets, things like that, to adjust and make sure that the exchange rate is somewhere around whatever fixed rate they chose. So if they chose a fixed rate of 80 cents US as the exchange, they would then do monetary policy, basically market manipulation, to keep the money around 80 cents. Otherwise, you'd get problems with inflation and things like that. The floating rate, which is what we're on, is strictly market-based. And that means that the exchange rate fluctuates, as you can see. And as you can see, all of this stuff is from the open market buying and selling Canadian dollars. And that the buying and selling of Canadian dollars, it reflects the confidence people have in the Canadian economy. A lot of the times a strength of ours, when oil prices go up, the Canadian dollar goes up. Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Do we want a high dollar or a low dollar? Well, that depends. So, a high dollar value leads to increased investment in Canada and an increased purchasing power of imports. So basically, if you have a high Canadian dollar, you can afford to buy more foreign goods. And people want to invest in the Canadian dollar. So those are the things. What happens? What's the negative of this? It makes our exports expensive. Therefore, it drives down our exports. So our own companies have a harder time selling our goods on the foreign market. So conversely, if you have a low Canadian rate, right, that increases exports, but it decreases the purchasing power, or decreases imports. Also can have effect on tourism. So this would be, tourism would go up in Canada, and tourism here could go down. But Canadians traveling, more Canadians might travel if the interest rate is favorable. So if we had, an even dollar with the United States, yeah, you'd have more Canadians going down there to shop because some things are less expensive, right? But at the same time, you'd have fewer Americans coming up here because their dollar wouldn't go as far, because our prices reflect the exchange rate, and our prices are more expensive that way. So it is a push-pull thing. Anytime that the Canadian dollar starts to rise, they start to talk about inflation pressures, right? The more value on the Canadian dollar, the more pressure on inflation. But right now, with a loonie around 80 cents, our inflation rate is still, I think, somewhere around 1 to 2%. Right? We're not in danger in terms of inflation. I think it's closer to 1 than it is 2. Okay, so I used to have a thing where you'd calculate exchange rates, but everybody does that on their phone. So there's no real point for me to give you an assignment of you calculating exchange rates. That's just me seeing how well you can Google or use the currency calculator that's on part of Google. Anyway, this is the idea, though, is the idea that exchange rate affects trade, right? So a lower Canadian dollar improves our exports abroad, whereas a higher Canadian dollar improves our importing because our dollar goes farther. Okay, the higher the dollar, the more inflationary pressure is on the economy. And yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for that stuff. The last thing I'm going to talk about, so again, I'm not going to give you anything to do with this. This is just information going forward. The last thing I'm going to talk about is marks. And first of all, if you want a mark update, then just email me. I'm very bad with sending out. I don't have a good way of sending out like a mass thing that shows what your mark is, that kind of thing. So yeah, just ask me and I can give you a ballpark. But the idea that marks are an average of all your marks is, and it should have been gone. That should have been gone almost a decade ago. Your mark is not an average of your marks. Your mark is not an average of weighted marks either. It's closer to this. Weighted means that, assignments are worth less than, say, culminating assignments and stuff like that. Exams worth so much, all that kind of stuff. I think you get that too. But now, you basically have, I'm not going to get into the lingo, all that stuff, but basically anything that I observe, anything that you submit, right? Those things go together to form your mark. And that means that in this case, you're looking at assignments and discussions. This is a lot of portfolio stuff. And then also questions you ask at times. So, or response to feedback, right? It's a little bit harder to observe you as an e-learning course, but the portfolio really serves that purpose. So when you look at, basically, to explain this, when you do your assignments, the other thing is, and again, I'm shocked that people don't know anything about this, but don't know, and now I can't even think about what is it called. Not latest and greatest, that's just ridiculous. It's most recent, most consistent. Okay, so let's add these things together. So first of all, as usual, right, assignments and discussions, they're marked. You can see the marks as they come in. Your portfolio stuff, I'm not marking individually. So I watch your videos, I check out the handouts and things like that, and I see how much you are understanding it. And I make notations to myself about that stuff. I also look at the questions you ask, and sometimes when you challenge like my feedback or whatever, and I can then see from that how much you actually are understanding the concepts. And so that goes into it too. So all this stuff goes into what a teacher gets to do, which is called professional professional judgment. Okay, that means that I take all the stuff that I've seen you do, again, stuff for marks and stuff not for marks, all the stuff I've seen you do, and from that I determine where I see you as being in the course, so then this feeds also into this idea of most recent, most consistent. So let's say your marks are, I gave this example to somebody. Oh, I wish I could. Anyway, let's say your marks are, 73, 74, 57, 78, 80, and 86. So how many marks is that? That's 3. That's not enough. And then let's give you another 80. Okay. Hold on. I'm going to adjust this slightly. Only because I want to put in another mark here. Okay. All right. So if you add these together, which I'm going to do right now, so 72 plus 73 plus 74 plus 74 plus 57 plus 78 plus 80 plus 86. Okay. And then you divide it by 8. You have a mark of 74.25%. Okay, so that's your average out of those marks. Now, strictly looking at these marks, what do you see when you think of most recent, most consistent? Right? What trend do you see? So I see, when you look at these marks, the trend is going up. That cowboy there is what you like to call an outlier. Right? That's when somebody, they had 2 tests in the same day. They really didn't understand that particular concept. They broke up with so-and-so, whatever happened. Who knows what happened? This is an outlier because it doesn't match the other marks, right? You've got a 57 amongst 70s and 80s. So it's dragging this number down, right? Mathematically, it's going to drag that number down. It just wouldn't make sense. If I look at this, just not even knowing who this is, this looks like this person would end up more around 78 to 80%. Because you can consistently see that their progress in the course is going up. They're understanding more things. They only have 1 mark, that was they bombed one thing. So in terms of most recent, most consistent, you're looking at right in there, because even these ones way less than these ones out here. And this doesn't seem to be a great reflection at all. Then if you add into, hey, they, you know, in class they ask great questions, they work well, working things out, they like their thinking is on point, maybe this becomes even higher. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If you see that, you know, maybe the higher marks are based on a lot of group work, well, maybe the mark isn't quite as high. Maybe that 86 was a group presentation thing, so maybe you're looking at more like a 70, you know, 77 to 78 kind of thing, right? So all I'm saying is the marks are not a straight mathematical equation. That's not the way it works. That's why there's such thing as professional judgment. You look at the entire student. I look at everything you've done and everything I've seen you do, including asking questions and all those things. All right, so hopefully that makes a lot of sense. And continue to work on the group assignment today, and tomorrow we'll go back into looking at, what are we looking at tomorrow? Go back into, sorry, would have been a great thing to actually tell you the next thing. Well, I guess we're looking at international development tomorrow. All right? All right. That didn't turn off. Let's try again. Dude.